The storm didn't arrive quietly. It roared in like a warning the world had ignored for too long, swallowing the road, the sky, and every trace of warmth in its path. The snow came down in furious sheets, blinding and relentless, turning headlights into useless halos and footsteps into vanishing memories. Somewhere in that white chaos, she was falling apart. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the quiet miracles that happen when strangers choose to care, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us what it means to be human. Ethan Cole had no intention of stopping that night. His hands were tight on the steering wheel, his eyes narrowed against the storm as he drove down the nearly abandoned highway. His 7-year-old daughter, Lily, was curled up in the back seat under a thick blanket, her small breaths fogging the window beside her. He had promised her they'd make it home before midnight, promised her hot chocolate and warmth and safety. Promises, he had learned, were fragile things, easily broken by life. The road ahead blurred, swallowed by snow. Visibility dropped to almost nothing, and Ethan considered pulling over, waiting it out. But the idea of stopping in that storm felt just as dangerous as moving forward. He pressed on, his mind weighed down by the familiar heaviness he carried every day, the absence of Lily's mother, the loneliness of raising a child on his own, the quiet exhaustion of being strong when there was no one left to lean on. Then he saw it. At first, it was just a shadow against the white, something out of place, something that didn't belong. He slowed instinctively, squinting through the storm. As his headlights cut through the snow, the shape became clearer. A figure, a person, standing or barely standing on the side of the road. Ethan's heart jolted. No one should have been out there, not in that storm, not at that hour. His first instinct was caution. He had a child in the car. He couldn't risk. But then the figure staggered, collapsing to their knees in the snow. That was enough. He pulled over. The wind slammed against the car as he stepped out, biting into his skin like needles. Snow soaked through his shoes almost instantly as he rushed toward her. She was barely conscious, her body trembling violently, her coat thin and inadequate against the brutal cold. Snow clung to her hair, her face pale and drawn, lips tinged blue. For a moment, Ethan hesitated, not out of fear, but out of the overwhelming weight of the situation. This wasn't just someone stranded, this was someone on the edge. He knelt beside her, his voice firm but gentle, trying to keep her awake, to keep her present. Her eyes fluttered open briefly, unfocused, as if she wasn't sure if he was real. She tried to speak, but the words were lost in the wind. There was no time. He lifted her carefully, surprised by how light she felt, as if life itself had begun to slip away from her. Carrying her through the storm felt like pushing against the world's resistance, but he made it back to the car, opening the passenger door and easing her inside. The warmth hit her immediately, but her body didn't respond right away. Hypothermia had already begun its quiet, dangerous work. Ethan stirred in the back seat, blinking awake as his father climbed back in. Her sleepy eyes widened at the sight of the stranger. She didn't ask questions, not yet. She simply watched, sensing something serious in the air. Ethan turned the heat up, his mind racing. The nearest town was still miles away, but stopping wasn't an option anymore. Not now. As the car moved forward again, the storm still raging outside, the silence inside was heavy with uncertainty. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her story, but somehow, in that moment, their lives had collided, and nothing would ever be the same again. The road stretched endlessly ahead, each mile feeling longer than the last. Inside the car, the atmosphere shifted slowly from panic to fragile hope. The woman's breathing had steadied slightly, though her body still shook uncontrollably. Ethan kept glancing at her, his grip tightening on the wheel each time her eyes closed for too long. Lily, now fully awake, leaned forward from the back seat, her small voice breaking the silence. She asked softly if the lady was going to be okay. Ethan didn't have an answer, but he told her they were going to help her, that they had to. The nearest town finally appeared like a distant promise through the storm. Dim lights flickered in the distance, growing brighter as they approached. Ethan pulled into a small roadside clinic, the only place still open in that weather. He didn't wait for help to come out. He carried her inside himself, calling out urgently. The warmth of the building wrapped around them like a lifeline. Hours passed in a blur of activity. Doctors, blankets, hushed voices. Ethan stayed, even though part of him knew he could have left. He had done enough, hadn't he? He had saved her from the storm. That should have been the end of it. But something kept him there. Maybe it was the way she had looked at him in that brief moment of awareness, like she had been holding on to something fragile, something that needed just one reason to keep going. Or maybe it was because Ethan knew what it felt like to lose everything. When the doctor finally came out, his words were cautious but hopeful. She would survive. Severe hypothermia, exhaustion, dehydration, but she had made it in time. Relief washed over Ethan in a way he hadn't expected. It wasn't just relief for her, it was something deeper, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Lily smiled for the first time that night, her small hand slipping into her father's. She said softly that they had saved her. Ethan didn't correct her, because maybe they had. Days passed before she woke up fully. Her name was Ava. She remembered fragments, the storm, the cold, the overwhelming sense of being lost, but there were gaps in her memory, pieces missing like a broken puzzle. She didn't talk much at first, her eyes carrying a quiet sadness that spoke louder than words. Ethan visited her once, intending it to be a simple check-in, but that one visit turned into another, and then another. Lily grew attached to her quickly, drawn by something unspoken. She would bring small drawings, little bursts of innocence and innocence, leaving them by Ava's bedside. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, Ava began to smile. Ethan noticed it first, that change. It was small, but it mattered. Ava's story began to unfold gradually. She hadn't just been caught in the storm. She had been running from something, a life that had left her broken, abandoned, with nowhere left to go. The storm hadn't just been weather, it had been the final collapse of everything she had been holding together. Ethan understood more than he let on. He too had known what it felt like to stand at the edge of something unbearable. Their connection wasn't immediate or dramatic. It was quiet, built in shared silences, in understanding glances, in the slow rebuilding of trust. And somewhere along the way, something began to shift inside Ethan. For years, his heart had been frozen, not by the cold, but by loss. He had closed himself off, convinced that love was something he had already lost once and couldn't afford to lose again. But Ava was different. She didn't demand anything. She didn't rush anything. She simply existed in his world. And somehow, that was enough to begin melting the walls he had built around himself. Winter began to loosen its grip on the town, the snow slowly melting into quiet streams that carried away the remnants of the storm. Life returned in small, steady ways, roads clearing, skies softening, people stepping back into routines they had paused. But for Ethan, nothing felt the same anymore. Ava had become a part of their lives in a way neither of them had planned. She moved into a small apartment nearby after leaving the clinic, determined to rebuild on her own. Yet she was never far. Lily insisted on visiting, bringing laughter and light into Ava's once silent space. And Ethan found himself lingering longer each time. There were still moments of hesitation, of fear. Love, after all, had once shattered his world. The memory of loss didn't disappear, it lingered, a quiet warning in the back of his mind. But Ava wasn't asking him to forget. She was simply showing him that it was possible to feel again. One evening, as the last traces of snow disappeared under the fading sunlight, they found themselves sitting together in a quiet park. Lily played nearby, her laughter echoing in the distance. Ava spoke about her past, not all of it, but enough. About the pain, the loneliness, the feeling of being invisible in a world that kept moving without her. Ethan listened, not as a savior, but as someone who understood. And for the first time in years, he allowed himself to speak about his own pain, the loss of his wife, the emptiness that followed, the fear of opening his heart again. There was no dramatic moment, no sudden realization, just a quiet understanding between two people who had both been broken and were learning slowly to heal. As time passed, that understanding grew into something deeper, stronger, real. Ava didn't just survive the storm, she found a new beginning. And Ethan didn't just rescue her, he rediscovered a part of himself he thought was gone forever. Love didn't come rushing in like the storm that had brought them together. It came gently, steadily, like the thaw after winter. Before the story ends, take a moment to share something special in the comments. Have you ever experienced a moment where a stranger changed your life in an unexpected way? And if this story touched your heart, if it made you believe, even for a moment, that kindness still exists in the world, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support keeps these stories alive. Because sometimes the coldest storms bring the warmest miracles. And sometimes saving someone else is the only way to save yourself.